Hello and welcome to How to Homelab episode number 2. This is the series for all of you out there that are considering running a home lab and you need some inspiration, perhaps some guidance. Maybe you want to know what's all out there, what all options do you have. This is the series for you, and maybe if you are running a home lab already, some of the things that I talk about in this series might even inspire you on some of the things that you can run in your home lab. In today's episode, I am going to talk more about the individual components of a home lab, some of the considerations on the software level that you might want to make. And then later in the video, I am going to go over my home lab. And I've done that before, but it's actually changed quite a bit. So I wanted to give you guys a refreshed look at what I'm running, which might even inspire what you want to run on yours. Now, before I get into that, the first sponsor for today's video is Linode. Linode is my infrastructure provider for the cloud, and I love their service. I've been using it for quite some time, and I couldn't possibly be more pleased. And there's many things that I love about Linode that make it my tool of choice. But when I'm not running things on my home lab and I need something public-facing, something in the cloud, Linode has been my go-to for almost 2 years now, if not more than that. I've lost track. I love their easy-to-use interface, the selection of distributions that they have. It's a great fit for me because I get to pick the distribution that I need, which really helps with tutorials sometimes. And that's really good for you guys because if you are going through a tutorial on my channel, it helps you get up and running quickly so you can have a reference server to run all of the commands that I show off in my videos. I love the fact that backups and snapshots are very easy. They have features like object storage, even a way to set up your very own Kubernetes cluster through the dashboard. Their service is awesome. And there's a link in the description that will actually give you $100 in credit towards your new Linode account to help you get started. I really appreciate Linode's continued sponsorship of Learn Linux TV. Thank you so much. And also, I have one more sponsor to let you guys know about, which is actually, well, me, actually. I have written a book recently, Mastering Ubuntu Server 3rd edition. It's currently being edited and will be due out anytime now. You can go to ubuntuserverbook.com to pre-order your copy. Please do so. And when you do get your copy, I would really appreciate it if you leave a review somewhere. That would really help me out. The 2nd edition of this book was a real pleasure to write. I was very proud of it, but I'm even more proud of this version. There's some more awesome things to look forward to. I even go over Kubernetes and some other surprises, so definitely check it out. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get back into HomeLab. So first and foremost, I want to go over some of the individual components of a home lab from a software standpoint. In the previous video, I went over a few of the hardware options that you can consider, such as physical servers, Raspberry Pis, even spare laptops, which surprisingly make good servers. But now that you have the hardware, or you've decided what hardware to use, what do you actually install on that equipment? Now, first of all, you have to decide on the operating system. Now, I'm a Linux guy, so it's probably of no surprise that I'm going to recommend a Linux distribution. My two favorites for servers are Debian and Ubuntu. I usually cater more towards Ubuntu because it's more up-to-date, it has more features than Debian, the hardware enablement stack means that it's compatible with more hardware. Debian is still a great choice and highly recommended, don't get me wrong, but I just like Ubuntu Server a little bit more, and not just because I wrote a book about it. I actually do stand behind Ubuntu Server. I think it's a great choice. But you know, you can run something else. There's a server version of Fedora, there's CentOS. Those are all good choices. So some sort of Linux distribution should be perfectly fine. I think that's the easiest part of this video. Just install Linux. Okay, video over. No, actually there's more to it than that. Now that you have the distribution of Linux chosen and you have that installed, what next? So a home lab is intended to serve something to your home. Now, it's very popular to basically have some sort of media server. Now, honestly, Plex pretty much owns the market in this regard, and it's what I recommend as well. It basically allows you to rip your DVDs, Blu-rays, whatever you have, put them on a file server somewhere, and share them to the TVs in your house. It used to be Myth TV that was very popular for this aspect, but Plex has definitely taken over. Now, perhaps I'll do a tutorial for how to install Plex in the future. But the point of this video is just to tell you guys what's available to help you make decisions as far as what you should be running. Now, if you have Plex, you need to have a place to put your media, and media files are, as you probably already know, quite huge. Now, if you have a physical server with a ton of storage, well, you could just install your media files right on that same server that runs Plex. Another option is having a dedicated network attached storage device, such as TrueNAS, which is the new name for FreeNAS. The name has changed since the first video was recorded. It's now TrueNAS. TrueNAS is a little heavy when it comes to resources though, so you definitely want to take a look at the requirements. It's my favorite and it's my preferred. It's the one I recommend the most. But you have to have the hardware to support it. If you don't, then there's Open Media Vault, which, has a smaller development team and it's not as recognized as TrueNAS, but it's fine. It's actually a pretty good piece of software. So if you can't actually afford the hardware to run TrueNAS, or you just want something lighter in resources, Open Media Vault is a great way to go, and perhaps I can do a video on setting that up as well. Now, I won't actually do a video on setting up TrueNAS because my friend Tom Lawrence does such a great job with that. I can't even touch it. I'm going to totally just, admit that right now. He's the guy. He knows this stuff backwards and forwards. And he's the king when it comes to not only TrueNAS, but Unify and a number of other things. I recommend you check out his channel. So if you want a walkthrough on installing TrueNAS, he has you covered. Go over to his YouTube channel. I will have a link in the description. You can click on that link and check out his videos, and he will have you covered on that. Now, another popular thing to run on Homelab is some sort of virtualization server software. Proxmox is my go-to. I have videos on Proxmox already. That's what I run. I'll show you in a moment, and I highly recommend it. Now, there's other solutions that you can consider as well, such as ESXi, which if you are a fan of VMware, then that's a great choice for you. XCP-ng is also a good choice. I recommend one of those three as your virtualization platform if that's something that you want in your Homelab. Having virtualization set up is awesome on Homelab. It allows you to not only set up local servers, it also allows you to snapshot those servers so you could try out software configurations and then revert back if the experiment was a failure, for example. It helps you manage your backups. It's just a very awesome thing to have. So I do recommend that you look into virtualization software such as, again, Proxmox, XCP-ng, or ESXi. They are all good choices. Now, as your Homelab grows, you will have more and more and more servers set up. You might start with one, and then if you have a virtualization server, that one can turn into 10 or a dozen. And then next thing you know, you basically have a data center in your house. Which, that's the point, right? We want an awesome Homelab with a bunch of servers, but do we really want to manage each and every single server manually? What if there's a security vulnerability in the news? For example, maybe there's a vulnerability in OpenSSH. Oh my God, I have to get everything patched. Well, yeah, you do. And maybe you have to log into every server one by one and update that package. That's going to take a very long time. Now, when you have configuration management software, everything becomes a lot easier to manage because you can have one place to basically implement your configuration, and that one place will push that configuration out to all your other computers. And there's several solutions that you can consider, such as Puppet. There's also Chef, as well as SaltStack. But my go-to is Ansible. It's super lightweight and highly recommended. I already have an entire playlist on my channel that goes over Ansible, even a beginner series that you can go through that'll teach you everything that you need to know. I definitely recommend that you check out the Ansible pull method because that's a method that I use, and there's also a video about that as well. I highly recommend learning Ansible because it makes configuration super easy. Now, another piece of software that is useful to look into is Pi-hole. Pi-hole is awesome because it's an ad blocker, and when you set it up, you could basically set up the DNS in your router to point to your Pi-hole server, which will subtract the ads as you browse the internet, or at least as many as possible. The block lists keep getting updated and it's blocking more and more things. Pi-hole is awesome. I highly recommend that you guys check that out. If you're interested, I'll consider doing a video on how to set that up. Even though Pi-hole is actually customized for the Raspberry Pi, you don't actually have to be using a Raspberry Pi to set that up. I actually use a VM on my Proxmox server for Pi-hole. So again, it doesn't have to be a Raspberry Pi. You can install Pi-hole on pretty much everything. Now finally, another piece of software I like to recommend is pfSense. pfSense is my router/firewall software of choice that gives you a lot of control over your network. Now, there's also OpenSSH that's very popular in this regard as well. I haven't personally tried it yet. A lot of people swear by that. Now, I won't actually do videos on pfSense because, again, my friend Tom Lawrence, he's beaten me to it. He has the best content when it comes to pfSense. So again, check out his channel and he will give you all of the information you need to know to get started on pfSense. But I highly recommend pfSense because, again, it gives you full control over your Homelab and your network, and it makes it very easy to do things like set up VLANs, which is something you might want to look into at some point to separate traffic. Like, for example, me, I have my desktops and laptops on a separate VLAN than my servers. Makes sense. You want to basically segregate your workloads and your traffic to better handle traffic. It's just a good idea. Now, what I'm going to do is switch gears and talk about my Homelab and some of the choices that I have made for setting up my own. All right, so here I am on my laptop, and I have pulled up a page for my virtualization software, Proxmox. This is the login screen right here, so you can see what that looks like. What I'm going to do is log in, and I will paste in my password right here. And this will give you an idea of what Proxmox looks like. Again, I already have videos on this subject. They are a little bit old, but Proxmox hasn't changed all that much, so the content in those videos should still apply to this latest version, 6.2, like I'm running here. At the very bottom, we have status messages. I'll just collapse that so we have more room. And I'm going to give you a quick look around. Now, first of all, one of the things that I really like about Proxmox is that it gives you the option right from the GUI, right from within this web browser, to create a virtual machine, as you see here, as well as a container. Now, what I like about that is a virtual machine is going to be heavier and it's going to use more resources, and a container is going to use fewer resources. Not all applications will run well in a container. It's trial and error. But it's always recommended to use containers when you can, because you can have a higher number of containers than virtual machines on the same piece of hardware. So one thing you can do is try the piece of software that you want to run in a container. Does it run well? Well, great. Keep it running in a container. If not, you can run it in a virtual machine. Now, virtual machines are easier to live migrate. And what live migrate refers to is the ability to migrate a virtual machine or container from one server in a cluster to another server in the cluster. Now here, I only have this server right here, VM host 1. If I had more than one Proxmox server in this cluster, you would see another one here. I used to have 2, and I'm probably going to implement another one in the future. But for right now, I have this one. But if I had a second one in this cluster, then what I would be able to do is move a server from one to the other. And why that's cool is maybe I want to update Proxmox on Proxmox server 1. What I could hypothetically do is move all of the containers and virtual machines to the second server, update the first server, move the VMs and containers back, and then update the second, which means none of the virtual machines will go down. Now, containers will actually be unavailable for a time when they are moving from one server to another. That is one downside, but for the most part, containers are preferred when it makes sense to use them. Now, I really like the interface because if I click on the server that I want to have more information on, I can go to the summary page. I can get a look for how utilized the server actually is. Now in my case, I'm only using about 20% of the memory and very little of the CPU. My load average is only a little bit north of 1, so I'm not really doing a whole lot of work on the server right now. So I really can't justify buying another server other than the fact that I want another server because, well, I want something new. But when it all comes down to it, the interface is very easy because you could just click on the summary page for any server to get some information about that. And if I collapse the arrow next to the name of the server, I get a listing for all of the servers, basically VMs and containers, that are running on that host, and I can get some information about them as well. So for example, if I click on my Jenkins server, I will also have a summary tab that'll give me similar information. This virtual machine, in my case, was configured with 2 GB of RAM, of which it's using 1.69. So again, not that heavily used. But if there was some kind of concern, then I would be able to see that here. Maybe I need to up the RAM, the CPU, or something like that. And also, like I mentioned earlier, I have Pi-hole running as a virtual machine. And in that case, it's not actually all that utilized. Click on the console window. I love this. It's going to show me what would be on the monitor if it had a monitor plugged in as a virtual machine. So of course it doesn't have a monitor, but in the console tab, you can see what is being displayed on that virtual machine. So I could log in as my user, just like I would a physical server. Now in my case, Jenkins isn't something that I use all that heavily. It's actually something I plan to get into more deeply, but I never got around to it. So that's not really being used much. I already mentioned Pi-hole. And earlier in the video, I mentioned Plex, which is where my movies are saved that I want to watch on all of my TVs, my media collection basically. And I also use PlexAmp, which is a phone app that allows you to play music that is saved on your Plex server. Plex is not good just for only video. It's also good for music. I have that set up as well. And also, I have a few Minecraft servers right here, as you can see. I find that Minecraft servers are great in Proxmox because I can spin up a new Minecraft server anytime I want one. I have some staging instances here, a handful of those actually. And the staging instances are actually for testing Ansible configuration. I use Ansible for configuration management. What I do is I test all Ansible changes against these VMs. I have one for each distribution that Ansible supports in my case. I have configured Ansible to support Ubuntu, Debian, Arch, Pop! OS, and Manjaro as well. And I have a staging VM for each, so I could test all of my changes before those changes go to become final and then get pushed out to all the other servers. Now, a full tutorial and explanation of Proxmox is beyond the scope of this video, but I've wanted to talk about some of the basics in the interface, which I've done, and we can go ahead and move on. Next up, we have pfsense. Now, pfsense isn't actually a Linux software. It doesn't run Linux in the background. It's actually BSD. But personally, I haven't actually found firewall software on the Linux side of things that actually measures up to pfsense in my opinion. So what I'm going to do is log in here as well, and I'll give you guys a look around. On the dashboard, you can see a list of all your interfaces. So I have all these VLANs. Of course, we have WAN, which is my outside connection. And I have a VLAN for servers, for devices such as laptops or desktops. My kids are in their own VLAN. I have a guest VLAN for the guest Wi-Fi network, an Internet of Things VLAN, a VLAN specifically for virtual machines, and then I have a VLAN called Media, which is for Rokus and PlayStations and tablets and things like that, to keep those segregated from the rest of the network. Now, pfsense gives you a lot of control over your network and things, and I'm not going to go over everything here because there's so many things you can do. I'm going to keep this section short because Tom Lawrence, like I've mentioned before, has it covered. He already has great content on this. You should definitely go over there and check out his channel and tell him Jay sent you. Also, what I want to do is show you guys TrueNAS. And as I've mentioned before, TrueNAS is my software of choice for network attached storage. With a Homelab, it's a great idea to have a central place to store files, media, backups, or whatever you want to store. And then when you log in, the interface is actually pretty cool. It's very easy to use. I love the fact that it uses ZFS, and one of the things that I love most about that is that ZFS has some of the best snapshot capability in the business. It makes it easy to set up an automatic snapshot routine so you can fall back to an earlier snapshot or access an earlier snapshot to do file recovery, for example, if you delete something you didn't mean to. And the interface is just great. On the main page, you actually see some information about your server. It tells you how much storage you have available. I have 3.46 TB of storage available. It also shows you how much memory you have and how much memory is being used by the ZFS cache and also services. And then when it comes to storage, we can actually create individual data sets for all of the things that we want to store, which allows us to separate things and segregate one thing from another. And it helps us do snapshots because we can have a different snapshot schedule for each individual data set. As you can see here, I have quite a few. I even have one for SyncThing. SyncThing is my favorite file synchronization utility of choice. I have a video on my channel already that shows you how to use SyncThing, so check that out if you're interested. What SyncThing allows me to do is have the same files on all of my laptops and desktops, and TrueNAS in this case serves as the central storage for SyncThing. All of my machines sync directly to the server. Another thing that's really cool about TrueNAS is that they have awesome plugins that you can install. They even have a Plex Media Server plugin if you want to go ahead and get Plex set up, because if you're going to host your media on TrueNAS, you may as well have Plex installed because, like I mentioned before, it's a great solution for that. Nextcloud is even supported. There's all kinds of different things that you can install on TrueNAS. I love their support for plugins. It's a very great feature. But as far as a full overview of TrueNAS is concerned, I'm going to again defer you over to Tom Lawrence and his channel because he has some great content about this. Again, tell him Jay sent you. But my goal here is to talk about some of the things that I'm running on my Homelab. And this is a very high-level overview. There's other things that I'm running that I will want to show you guys in future episodes. But for now, I wanted to give you guys some inspiration, show you a few things that I'm running, and hopefully that helps you out. So I'm going to stop this episode right here so it doesn't get too long. I could talk all day about Homelab. I love it. But in future episodes, what I'm going to do is talk about individual topics in detail to give you guys some information on individual aspects of Homelab in greater detail. So I will have the next episode of this series up as soon as I can get it ready. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe because if you do, you will be the first to see a notification for that episode as soon as it's up. And in the meantime, I will see you again very soon. Just let me know in the comments what type of content you want me to make in this series, and it will actually shape future episodes. And I'll see you again very soon.